Okay, this week you're going to move beyond the factoring that you looked at last week, where you developed comfort with factoring 2, 3, and 4 term polynomials. This week you're going to move on to the general strategy so that when you look at a polynomial, you have an idea for how to begin factoring it. And then you're going to look at solving quadratic equations using factoring. Okay, so this week, make sure you take the time to look at the strategy for factoring a polynomial. And there's a couple of important steps in here. The first thing that you always want to do is make sure that you look to determine whether there's a common factor. Sometimes the GCF makes it so that a polynomial that initially you're going to look at and think is not factorable, if you pull out a GCF, suddenly you can see that it is factorable. There's a lot of times when the numbers get really big, particularly with the AC method, that if you pull out a GCF, the numbers get more reasonable and you start being able to factor things more easily. So you do want to begin by factoring out a common factor if there is one. Then you're going to go through the process of counting your terms, just so that you know whether you're looking at a 2-term, 3-term, or 4-term polynomial. Make sure you take the time to learn these different formulas. A difference of perfect squares you'll probably be able to figure out on the test, but a sum or difference of perfect cubes is a little bit more complicated, and you're not going to just stumble on it. So you want to make sure that you take the time to learn those formulas. 3-term, 4-term polynomials, and then at the end you always need to make sure that you finish up with 2 steps. First, make sure your polynomial is factored completely. Maybe there was a GCF that you missed in the first step that you can pull out at the end. If your final factorization has an x squared term in it, you should consider that maybe there's still a difference of perfect squares in there that you need to factor out more. And you'll see a couple of examples of that as you're working through the material this week. Last, remember you're always guessing when you factor. So no matter how well you believe that you're guessing, take the time to check your work by multiplying when you're all done. The last thing, on the test you will have to solve the quadratic equations by factoring. So make sure that you take the time to figure that out. Don't rely on the quadratic formula. I know a lot of you have seen it before, and you'll see it again next semester, but for now we're working on solving equations by factoring.